Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in the fields of health and wellness practice and hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm so happy to introduce today's guest, Laura Owen. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Lucia. It is a pleasure to be with you.
You know, Laura Owen is an author, speaker, and serial entrepreneur focused on empowering individuals to achieve optimal health. As the founder and CEO of Healthy ID, she leads an innovative program that reduces specialty medication costs for employers and employees while promoting lifestyle changes to reduce medication dependence. She's the author of Your Total Health Reset, which is going to be released here in July, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that from her. She has a background in corporate leadership, has advised ministries of health, and led strategic partnerships with top U.S. healthcare organizations. She previously co-founded a tech company for law enforcement, served as interim CEO of a global consulting firm, and was Kansas Secretary of Commerce. So she lives in Kansas City with her husband, Dave, and as you can see, she brings a broad depth of experience to the subject matter today. And I would just love to start by asking you, Laura, how did you get started with this interest in your interest of the intersection between lifestyle and health?
Well, like so many of us, I have had personal experiences with it. And the wake-up call for me was I lost my mother to breast cancer, and her mother had breast cancer, and I don't have any aunts or cousins or sisters to go by. And then I had two lumps, and they were pre-cancer, and thank the Lord, they were 100% captured, gone, great. But it also was a wake-up call because even though I've always really been on a pretty good path in terms of diet and fitness and all of those things, I realized there were a lot of things I could have been doing better to create an environment for my body that wouldn't revisit that history with the cancer, right? That's really where it is. And so the more I read, the more passionate I got about it, and learning through friends and other associates of various chronic illnesses that they were dealing with it, had major suffering. And the solution in our society today is just another pill. And those pills are never cures. They're just band-aids that we put on symptoms. So it kind of became a revolutionary thing for me to just no, we have to get the truth out and say to people, this is an empowering moment for you. If you've just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, thank the Lord we have Lucia. Thank the Lord we have the medicine that we have today, because it is completely reversible, as are most chronic illnesses. And Lucy, a really interesting statistic that I think is kind of shocking. As a nation, we spend about $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare, far more than any other developed country in the world, and yet our outcomes are worse than the other developed nations. It's outrageous. And
It is.
It is, right? And the National Institute of Health tells us that 90% of that $4.5 trillion is for chronic illnesses that are preventable and reversible with changes in diet and lifestyle. Not with another pill, not with another shot or surgery, with diet and lifestyle. So it's actually much easier than what we put ourselves through with this string of endless pills.
Yeah, I think that's really great context for what we're going to be talking about today, because not only are the biggest killers in America preventable, but even once you have a diagnosis, much of the time it is reversible. We know that things like obesity and diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure are all preventable.
Yes.
And many cancers we know for a fact are preventable, like colon cancer.
Yes.
But even once someone has a diagnosis, if it's done early enough before there's too much permanent damage, so many of those can also be reversed. And so it's like, wherever people find themselves today, I think it's really important for you to know that there's hope, that it does, your diagnosis is not your destiny, that you actually have a lot to say about what the rest of your life is going to look like. And I want to start in the first part of what we talk about today, looking at kind of the way we think about ourselves. How do our beliefs, our core beliefs, our mindset, how do they affect like the development of these diseases. What do you see as that link?
I'm a big believer in having control over our mindset, our thoughts. That's how I define mindset or mindfulness. Because so much of the world is pushing in information every day, more than ever. And yet, if we allow that information in, sometimes the messaging that we accept from that doesn't really serve us. And it just adds to the pressure of everything.
Mm.
So, how we talk to ourselves sometimes is meaner than our worst enemy might say to us, right? Very often, what we say to ourselves, what we allow other people to, what we hear from other people, and what we allow to impact our minds and our hearts. We have to have control over that. And so in my book that's coming out July 1st, this is one of the 10 pillars that I talk about is being very intentional about your thought process. How do you
Mm.
talk to yourself? How do you view the world? If your view of the world at the end of every day is bitterness and anger, that's an internal problem and that's eating you up inside. So getting
Mm.
a handle on that and being intentional about what is that thought process I'm allowing and being intentional about changing that story, what you're telling yourself about the world and about yourself is really vital to good health because your mind and your body are inextricably connected.
That's so true. And if we have courage, if we decide we want to take charge of our health, we
Yes.
want to kind of drive the boat forward, we can
Yeah,
do that. And nobody
absolutely.
else can do it for us.
Exactly. Exactly. We often depend on our doctors, and God bless our doctors, right? They're
Mhm.
so overloaded. In fairness
Mhm.
to them, they're not trained in preventive health. And a lot of what you and I are talking about today is preventive, right?
Mhm.
It's preventive and reversing. But doctors today, on average, have just 7 minutes with a patient.
Mhm.
And one of the catalysts that caused me to start this business was I was looking at blogs about various chronic illnesses, and I came across a blog for people who had just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes,
Mhm.
completely reversible illness. And people don't know that, and doctors don't tell you that. They just give you insulin and send you home. And this young woman, 30 years old, went on Facebook to this community and expressed that she was suicidal.
Mhm.
She had just been diagnosed as type 2 diabetic and she had seen her mother go through type 2 diabetes where she lost her limbs, she lost her eyesight, and she lost her life. And
Mhm.
she really had no life. And
Mhm.
that young woman thought that was her destiny.
Mhm.
That killed me to read her
Mhm.
story. And it was a pivotal moment for me. And I wrote back to her immediately saying, this diagnosis is a gift because this is completely reversible, but you need to take charge of this and you're going to need to make some changes. And they can start with baby changes. Baby changes lead to big changes. She couldn't believe that nobody had told her that possibility and
Mhm.
she had no hope. So she promised to make significant changes. And I'm so sad that I've lost touch with her. It was just kind of a passing post. And I wish I had stayed in touch with her to encourage her through that. But really, I think it was a changing moment for her as well because she
Mhm.
just she just didn't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she was a very important part of my decision to recognize the opportunity to empower people with the hope, the real hope. It's not just, you know, maybe should have. No, it's rock solid. You really can make a huge difference in your life by changing a few things, even in a small way.
Mm. I think that is so important for people to hear. It's a vital message and life saving because, like you say, having hope can be the difference between feeling
Yes,
like there's a reason to live and feeling like there's not.
exactly.
So, one of the
Yeah.
things I'd like us to dive into today that we don't hear as much about, maybe around metabolic issues, is the area of how we can detox, clean our bodies up from the things that are impacting our foundational health in negative ways.
Yes.
So I'm going to kind of let you lead on this. What should we think about first when we think about reducing our toxin load?
So usually when we think about toxin load, we're thinking about environmental things, which is very, very legitimate to be concerned about those things, but also our relationships.
Mm,
Huge. That connects to the mindset. If we surround ourselves with people who are bitter and negative and hateful toward others and toward the world, guess what's going to happen?
mm.
Those toxins affect us and our outlook on life, right? We reflect,
Yeah.
we become who we hang out with. There's a Bible verse about that. And so that's really important, is to look at your relationships. And I'm not saying to separate forever from people who are maybe toxic in your life, but maybe add some people that are not so toxic. So that feeds
Dilute the
your heart,
toxin.
dilute the toxins, right? And then from an environmental perspective, there are so many things we use in our everyday lives we're not even aware of that are really toxic. And by just simply gradually replacing, I'm not saying throw out, all of your cleaning chemicals. I am saying maybe when you run out of certain things, replace them with things that are not so toxic. There's a website free, and I think it's one of the greatest websites out right now, ewg.org. Fantastic nonprofit organization, and they study all kinds of products, whether they're consumer products, shampoo, skincare, all the lotions and potions that we women do to our bodies every day, in addition to cleaning chemicals and the quality of our water. They evaluate all that stuff, and this website is massive and it's free. So
Mm,
if you question some of the products you're using every day, whether it's cosmetic or maybe the skin cleansers, the lotions, the nail polishes, I know it's kind of a bummer to say that, but there are actually some out there that are not so toxic. But
mm,
yeah, lightening the toxic load on our hearts and our bodies is it's one of the 10
mm,
pillars spoken of in the book, is critical. Without
mm,
that, if we're constantly pushing bad stuff into our hearts and our bodies, guess what? Bad stuff is going to happen, right? So it's imperative that we be mindful of that, right? All of the 10 steps are about becoming mindful of, what we eat, how we move, how we manage our stress, the water that we're drinking every day. What are we drinking every day, right? And the
mhm.
toxic load that we're putting on our bodies, whether it's environmental or relational. Um, oral health. Here's a shock. Oral health, right? Who
Wow.
would have thought? So we've heard all our life, brush your teeth twice a day. Well, they're now finding, we've known for a long time that the plaque in the mouth is directly correlated to heart disease. We've known that. But recent studies, major studies, have learned that the plaque in the mouth is also found in Alzheimer brains.
Mm,
So it's a contributing factor to Alzheimer's. So oral health, there are a lot of things you can do with this. Um, I interviewed a really interesting biological dentist. This is a guy who's all about getting rid of mercury fillings,
mm,
replacing those, right? Those, because the mercury leaks into the body and it's all bad,
mhm,
right? But he talks about how important it is to floss every day. We know that, right? Using a Sonicare toothbrush twice a day, really important. He talks about not using fluoride toothpaste. And that's very different from what we've been hearing from Crest and Colgate for so many years. But the fact is we have too much fluoride in our lives, right? It's in our water supply, it's in toothpaste. He talks about that. And then here's a tip I bet most people haven't heard. I hadn't heard it before he told me. If you take a couple teaspoons of Himalayan salt and put them in about a cup of warm water, shake it, let
mhm,
it dissolve, and then 3 times a week or so, use it for a pre-rinse before you brush your teeth. Pre-rinse for about a minute, spit it out, brush your teeth. Big difference. Much
mm,
cleaner mouth, much without ruining the natural biome that you want in
mhm.
your mouth that feeds your gut. And so
Interesting.
really interesting. Yeah. So even
Yeah.
oral health contributes to our health or our illness.
Mm. And I think that, we now know, and people are starting to hear more about this, that inflammation is a real root cause of so many of these chronic illnesses. And so
Absolutely.
inflammation in our mouth
Yes,
contributes to overall inflammation. And
exactly.
yeah, I think that is something that a lot of people don't realize. And we're starting to hear more about issues coming up when people have had like root canals done. And then
Yes,
often there's
yes.
inflammation
Leaking.
that's hidden there, right?
Yes, exactly.
I know with my mother in law, she had Parkinson's and Lyme disease in her later years. And then we realized some of her cognitive issues were actually coming from mercury poisoning from her
Yes,
fillings.
yes.
And, especially if people have a mix of metals in their mouth, like silver
Yeah,
and gold,
yeah,
there tends to be a much higher release of mercury from those amalgam fillings. So
yeah.
I do think that's something people should pay attention to. But
Yes.
also like know that you need to go to somebody that's like a biological dentist, like you were talking about, somebody that really knows how to remove those fillings safely.
Good
Because if you
point.
just ask to have them removed and
Could be
and
worse.
refilled with something else, you can end up being really poisoned.
Yes,
So
exactly right. That's right.
yeah.
Getting that done right.
Mm,
Talking about chronic inflammation, that's really the essence of my book, right? I rewrote the book because in the very
mm,
first version, it was so incredibly clinical. My chief medical officer, who was a surgeon at Mayo Clinic his whole life, he read the book when it was just the manuscript, and he said, "Oh, well, this book is absolutely medically correct. Everything in here is accurate, but it's so boring, nobody's going to read it. So rewrite it and make it something that people will read." So I had to rewrite the whole thing, and it's about half as thick as it was. All the clinical references are in the back, and he wrote the forward of the book. But the essence of it is that our bodies respond to everything we do to them, right? Whether
mhm,
it's lethargy or exercise, whether it's we're feeding ourselves fast food and processed foods or whole foods, and
mhm,
as many plant-based foods as we can, minimizing our meat, making sure our fish are healthy, not, wild caught fish, and as much as we can do of that, and just eliminating the chips, the soda, all that junk food. And, for a long time, I thought, well, that would be so expensive to shift to this healthier way of eating. And I actually find I spend less now on my groceries because first of all, I'm not eating as much, but I'm not eating chips anymore. I'm not eating all of the expensive processed foods. And
mhm.
instead, I'm pretty much shopping the perimeter of the store. So I eat a lot of produce. I don't eat a whole lot of meat, beans, and it's a progression, right? So you don't all at once make all those changes. You do it gradually, and then you start to realize I feel better. I feel
Yeah.
better.
As we talk about the things we can do to lower the toxin load in our body, we've talked about environment, we've talked about skin. I think that's a big one that people don't think about just because everything we
Yeah,
put on our skin, it ends up inside our body like within a few
exactly.
minutes.
It's our biggest
Um,
organ. Yeah.
yeah, it is. We've talked about oral health, relationship toxins. So, what are some of the other things that can help us as we're looking to maybe balance our hormones and
Yeah.
really optimize the way our body functions?
So a lot of the medications that we are taking, we're on this, what I call a hamster wheel in the United States of our health system. It's really a sick
Mm-hmm,
care system. And we take these medications because the doctor, having 7 minutes with us, hears our problem and just is treating the symptoms with more medication.
mm-hmm,
And very often, those medications, as they start accumulating, often create interactions that are really dangerous. So, and as you well know, when you're on medication for a long time, then your body starts responding to that, and it's not good. So
mm-hmm,
I have a chapter about medications and talking about see if you can get off of those medications by working with your doctor.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's
as
important.
right, it's very important. And as you start taking these baby steps toward better health, track your progress. And then as you're making progress, ask your doctor, what can we eliminate from my prescriptions? What can we eliminate? And
Mm,
then when we look at the gaps in our health in terms of supplementation, nationally, we have a kind of a vitamin D crisis and a magnesium crisis in the United States. And those two deficiencies lead to all kinds of health problems. So, thinking about some supplements, I think everyone should take a really high quality multivitamin every day, right?
mm,
And you want to have a good dose of vitamin D in there. Um, for people that have a problem with sleep, and actually I don't anymore, but because I've been on bioidentical hormones for 10 years in part, but also there's something on the market called Calm, CALM. The best deal is at Costco, and it's
okay.
magnesium. It's the proper form
Mm,
of magnesium, and you take it right before you go to bed. And the reason I love it is it's not a sleep aid, it's a natural mineral, but it helps your body just relax. So when
mhm,
you fall asleep, you have more restful sleep. So we can
mm,
sleep 8 hours a night, but if we're not having restful sleep, it's not going to do us much good. So I'm a big believer in that. I don't own the stock. I have nothing to do with the business. I just think it's a great product, but it also
yeah.
helps to alleviate this magnesium deficiency that we have as a nation. So the goal is to get off these medications and
Mhm,
to give our bodies everything we can to feel our best. And here's why, at the end of the day, why does it matter? Because we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are all
so
made
true.
for we're made for a purpose.
Yeah.
And if we don't feel good, if we don't have the energy or we're sick or we're just not feeling good, guess what? We're not going to achieve those dreams that we had when we were young.
Mm,
So I'm a big believer in recognizing you were born for a purpose. And we all know what your purpose is, Lucia, because you share it with us. But, we all have a purpose. We're
yeah.
all here for a reason. And to live that out in fullness, we need
Mm,
our bodies to come alongside of us, right? To be at our best
yeah.
state. So
Absolutely.
that's what drives me more than anything is helping people to embrace their health, embrace the
Mm,
power that they have to take care of themselves. Yeah, listen to the doctor, but recognizes, that doctor only has 7 minutes and they're trained to just give you pills. That's not your goal, right? Your goal is not
right.
being on the pills, your goal, but with your doctor's support, you want to be able to be a healthy, vibrant person for a long life.
That's right. And to be able to be high functioning, to stay mobile, all of those sorts of things that really make life worth living as we age and as we get older. So I just really love what you've brought here to us today. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought and some really practical things that we can think about how we can help our bodies, support our bodies as we learn to detox and not have all of these toxins affecting the function of our body. But you
Yeah.
also have a free gift for our audience today. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
You bet. A few months ago, I hired a professional videographer, and over 2 days, I interviewed 10 huge subject matter experts on the topics that my book covers. And these are the 10 pillars to recapture our health. And so it was really some very interesting interviews. And each of them are about 20 minutes long, very doable. You can watch them at your own pace. And I would welcome your viewers. They're welcome to have those at no cost. That normally is a program
Oh,
that we only offer through employers. So I would love to make that available to your audience.
well, thank you so much, Laura. The link will be on the page wherever you're watching this video so that you can also learn from those experts that Laura was able to interview. And remember, health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. So glad you could be with us here today.
Thank you so much, Lucia. It's a pleasure.